Hi, I'm Natalie Ledwell and welcome to Not Over, Just Different, a podcast for women of a respectable age facing life's next new chapter. So grab a cup of tea and pour yourself a glass of wine and join me for some deep, real and candid conversations about everything from health, aging gracefully, relationships and how to make the next 50 years even better than the first. Well, hello and welcome to the podcast for today. Today, again, I have another one of my really good girlfriends who is coming to us. She's the founder of thinkandthin.com. Her name is Brittany Watkins, and I want to welcome you to the podcast. Brittany, how are you, darling?
I'm great. Thank you.
So you can imagine that with a website called Think and Thin, the kind of subject we're going to be talking about today. You know, that the relationship that we really had, that strange relationship that we have for a lot of women that we have with our bodies over the years. And I can definitely attest to being one of those women. I always joke about my beige years, which was basically my 30s, where I just seemed to be going through the motions. I kind of got moved out of my 20s where I was like this fit, amazing ropes instructor. And then, you know, Glenn and I owned a nightclub for 5 years and I got spat out the other side of that. Metabolism slower, definitely had a less healthy lifestyle and really struggled mentally, with my body image, with my relationship with my body, my relationship with food, with alcohol and all of that. And I think I was just exhausted, with all of the ways that I was beating myself up mentally, you know, inside. So, I wanted to, have a show that we talked about, where does this come from and how can we move through this and really, free ourselves from the relentless, negative self-talk that we have. So, and I think I'd really like to start, with your personal experience, because I know that you have a personal story that really has motivated you to do this work that you feel so passionate about.
Yeah, sure. So, my story starts when I was 15. I was homeless. I was kicked out of my house, and that was when I developed a binge eating problem. And I didn't realize I developed a binge eating problem. I just, knew that I felt really sad and lonely at night. And then I lived across the street from a Taco Bell, and I would go across the street and order 3 Mexican pizzas. And then, 3 or 4 months later, I woke up and I couldn't fit into my jeans anymore. And so I went down the traditional path of just, that was when I started to diet. So I realized, okay, if I want to take this weight off, I have to diet. And, tried pretty much every single diet on the planet, from, all the popular ones that everybody tried to even ephedra pills that made me completely crazy and paranoid. Tried to make myself throw up. I've gone through the extreme, ends of the scale when it comes to dieting and weight loss. And it wasn't until, maybe my early 20s that I realized, I have an emotional eating problem. I eat when I'm uncomfortable. And at that point, I was in therapy for because I was a homeless kid at 15. So surprise, I had
maybe a couple of issues there.
a few issues. But thank God I had this amazing therapist, and he had just learned about tapping or EFT. So he came into our session one day and he said, I just learned this weird technique over the weekend, but I think it really might help you. And sure enough, we went through a tapping session, and it was the first time in my life that I felt all the icky stuff in my body release. And I remember leaving that session, and I felt the lightest I'd ever felt in years. And we didn't work on the weight loss stuff in that session, but we just worked on some other emotional issues. And I just remember coming back every week and saying, hey, can we do that tapping thing? And the more I used it, the lighter I felt, the happier I got, the better my life became. Started making more money, and my depression lifted. I was able to have a good relationship with my family again. The only problem was that I was still struggling with my weight, and I was still struggling with emotional eating, but he was able to guide me to where, I found some books by Janine Roth and some other people that were talking about, eating when you feel bad. And so at least I had opened up my mind, and I was now aware that I was eating when I wasn't really hungry. And while tapping was working on so many other areas of my life, it wasn't actually helping me with my weight and with my emotional eating. It was so frustrating because tapping was like changing my life. I was so excited about it. I was sharing it with everybody I knew. And then but the one thing that I really wanted to get a handle on, I couldn't get a handle on. So anyway, fast forward years later, I really felt called. I felt this sort of whisper in the back of my head telling me, you're going to be the one that's going to solve this. And I just kept exploring it. And I just kept asking myself why I was making certain decisions and having certain behaviors. And over the course of about 10 years, I developed my own tapping method, basically that specifically works for food cravings, emotional eating, binge eating, and really any addiction, any addictive behavior. So anything that we're doing kind of uncontrollably. I've definitely struggled with a lot of addiction. Over drinking, shopping, whatever you're doing compulsively, I've done all of them. And, I was able to, over this course of years where I was really exploring why I was making certain decisions, I was able to come up with a method that overcomes that specific problem. So, that's what we've been doing. The business has been around for 10 years now, and we've helped over 100,000 women stop emotional eating and binge eating.
Right. And so what are the common patterns or the reasons that you see that come up for women that, that we have, that we develop these eating disorders,
Well, the biggest one, excuse me, I'm drinking. You can probably hear it in the microphone. I guzzle my drink, which is water, by the way. So one of the thing that I always talk about is the conscious and the subconscious mind. This is the biggest problem when it comes to women struggling with their weight, because so many women, and I'm sure you were one of them, I was one of them. Yeah. So many women are educated, they're successful in other areas of their life, they're smart, they know how to eat healthy, they know to exercise. The question that the thing that I always hear from women, and I know this was my own personal struggle, was I know how to do all the right things, I'm just not doing them, and I don't know why. And so that was my biggest problem. And so that was always the question that I was asking myself is, why am I doing this? What is driving this behavior? And what I discovered is that there's what we call them the 7 subconscious weight loss blockers. And basically what they are there's 7 really, really good reasons that your subconscious mind does not feel safe releasing the weight. And the majority of the reasons come from past trauma. So for me, it was being homeless at 15. There was some part of me that felt like having that extra weight on my body was somehow protecting me. I'll tell you, one of the most common reasons, I would say 98% of women that struggle with their weight have experienced some sort of, we call it the I'm too sexy weight loss blocker, which comes down to anything from sexual abuse, as we know the definition to be, to, I call it body boundary violation. And I want to talk about this because it's so common for women to have body boundary violations, but not realize it in the moment.
Right.
And so the way I describe body boundary violation is anything that makes you feel uncomfortable in your body. So let me give you some examples. Just recently, I started working with a client who, she's in my advanced program, and, she's 39 or 40 now. She's been struggling with her weight since she was 18 years old. Before that, she never had a problem. When we went back and I asked her, okay, what was going on around that time? She remembered that she went to Mexico. She got too drunk. She met some guy. He took her to his apartment, and things started to go a little too far for her. She freaked out. There was a moment where she thought that he was going to rape her. He didn't, but he just pushed her boundary. She ended up getting out of there. She's safe. It was obviously a scary incident, but nothing, sexual abuse didn't happen, as we know it. And, fast forward years later, she's struggling with her weight. We finally give her, we do some work around that. We release the emotional trauma around this. for the first time she's able to stick to a healthy eating plan. She's lost 40 pounds. It was the one thing that she had to do. So there's that experience. Another client of mine, her grandmother, when she was a kid, used to just always make comments about her body, whether she was too skinny, she was too fat, her pants were fitting her funny, her hair was funny. She would just always make comments about her body. That's a body boundary violation as well. So what women will do, what some women, it's not every woman, but some women who struggle with their weight, what they will do is they will feel uncomfortable, and then subconsciously their body goes, okay, we need an extra layer of protection. So typically this happens where women will just only have maybe 20 to 40 pounds of extra weight. It's not 100. Sometimes it's 100 or 200. That can happen. That I usually see that when there's like a lot of traumatic sexual abuse. Sometimes when it's just comments and just little small things like this that people wouldn't necessarily think is a big trauma, they'll create some extra weight as just like a barrier. Like, don't look at my body. Don't check me out. It's like a layer of protection. There's another girl, that was in my class. I'm remembering her story now. When she was 5 or 6, these boys took her behind a bush at school and felt up her dress. There was no penetration. They just took her behind a bush and felt her up, and she wasn't really sure how to respond. So there's things like this. And I actually had a live event with around 100 women. And I asked them, I explained the body boundary violation, and I asked them to raise their hand if they've experienced something like this. 98 women out of 100 women have experienced something like this. So it's one of those things that I like to talk about, because this is the subconscious reason you'll sabotage. So many women will say to me, Brittany, I'm doing great. I'm sticking to a new diet plan and I'm losing weight, and all my friends are telling me how great I look. And then I don't understand why I sabotage myself. And this is one of the biggest reasons, because your brain doesn't think that it's actually safe to be a thinner size. There's something that your body is trying to protect you from.
Right. I had an experience just recently, and I was in Costa Rica at a place called Rhythmia, and I was doing plant medicine down there. And I had such a massive breakthrough. And my experience was, because when you're there, you've got these certain intentions that you want to meet over the week. One is they believe, and which I also believe, is that we have an incident that happens when we're young. So that separates us from our soul. So the 3 intentions you want to meet over the week is, number 1, show me who I've become. And then you want to merge me back with my soul. And then the last one is heal my heart. And this last time I was there, when I was saying, show me who I've become, one of the things that she, when I say she, I mean Mother Ayahuasca, Mother Ayahuasca was saying was like, you don't love yourself. I was like, what? What do you mean? And she showed me a couple of incidences where I have, people that were singing my praises and being very heartfelt with me, and I'm just feeling uncomfortable, not receiving it. I'm like, interesting. And then, when I said, well, why is this? And she said, well, you didn't receive love as a child. My mother left when I was 3, and, my dad was doing his best, and then he married mum who had 6 kids. So then it's every man for himself, so it was just the situation it was. But I'm like, oh, that never even crossed my mind. And then, and then the next night, she was saying to me, look, Natalie, when you love yourself, you don't second guess yourself. You don't doubt yourself. You always make healthy choices because you do it out of love for who you are. And you don't need external motivation to do that. Now, since I've come back, I've been making super healthy choices. I've been exercising more. I've already gone down a notch on my belt. But having that, and really the last night when I was there, when I realized, when she meant love yourself, she meant love my soul, love the divine part of who I am, and understand that, these events have happened, but I can release that, and then step into this newer version. So I think that, having that self-love is a big piece. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, I think a lot of people are teaching self-love techniques. And I wrote a blog post about how I don't like the new self-love revolution, only because it's teaching people to have more massages and get pedicures. And, I know there's lots of techniques, but self-love actually comes from, healing these inner wounds, like what you just described. So one of the byproducts that I didn't know was going to be a byproduct of women going through my course is that when you go back and you heal these childhood wounds, like being homeless at 15, mom leaving at 3, not feeling loved by your parent, feeling, lonely as a child, or, whatever, moving. It could even be something like moving from one school to another, not feeling like you have any friends, or kids on the playground making fun of you. It can be as simple as that. When you heal those core wounds, not only does it show up as extra weight leaving your body, but it also shows up as improved self-esteem and self-love. Mm-hmm. And so most of the women that graduate my 6-month course, one of the biggest things we hear is, oh my gosh, like I love myself for the very first time. I'm not even trying to, I just love myself. And, so yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, that's happened to you as a result of healing those wounds. And that's something that we see all the time. And it's amazing. It's amazing to witness that. Also too, when you love yourself more, see these traumas that are in your subconscious, they create the belief systems. And I know you guys talk about this a lot with my movies. The one thing that I have, the one problem that I see with women that just focus on, okay, I'm going to visualize my best self. I'm going to manifest. If they don't clean up the stuff from the past, it'll keep weighing them down. It'll keep causing problems. So they'll want to manifest a great future, but somehow it'll sabotage, or they won't actually get what they want. And what I find is when you marry the two, when you do the deep healing work on stuff from the past, you're willing to go back and feel uncomfortable and dig some old shit up. You don't have to heal everything, but the stuff that's really uncomfortable, the stuff that was really big, and you pair that with, what do I want for the future? Positive affirmations, writing out, what you want and the type of world you want to create for yourself. When you marry those two, you just become an unstoppable force. But I have found that in order to really heal, especially weight issues and low self-esteem, you need to do the work on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the other core wounds that you see that are fairly common?
Well, one of them is, we call it the Clean Your Plate Club. So this one is definitely for women of a certain age who grew up usually with parents who had grandparents that experienced World War II. Mm-hmm. So there was a scarcity of food back then, and grandma and grandpa told our parents, you better clean all that plate. You cannot go to bed until you eat all the food on your plate. And what this does, I don't know if you've ever noticed children, if their parents haven't already traumatized them with this belief, but if you look at children, how they eat, sometimes they're very picky eaters, right? So kids are very intuitive about eating from the time they're born. We as parents, obviously parents always come. I believe that we always come, especially parents, come from a place of doing their best. And so, the parents thought they were doing the best that they could by telling you to eat your broccoli and eat your greens and finish all your food because they don't want you to be hungry later and things like that. But what ends up happening is you learn as a child to override your body's sensations. And so you'll overeat because throwing food away actually gives you anxiety. So this is one of my favorite techniques to do with people. I actually have them, we do this on a group class. I have them buy one of their favorite meals or make one of their favorite meals and bring it to class. And they take a couple of bites of the food. And then the next part is they pick the plate up and they walk over to the garbage can and they throw it in the garbage can. And people that have the Clean Your Plate Club program in their subconscious mind, they freak out because subconsciously what's happening, they're not aware of it, but their parent, whoever that is screaming at them for throwing food away. And so this is just it's a tiny little voice that's going on in the back of their head. If you think about being an adult and you're at dinner and you're talking to your friends, you're not thinking my mom's going to get mad at me if I don't finish all this food on my plate. You're just going to eat until all the food on your plate is gone, right? So it's completely subconscious. You don't realize that it's there. Right. So once we do the process and we heal this, which actually doesn't take very long, once we do this process, people find that it's much easier for them to leave food on their plate, that they just completely make peace with throwing food away. I have a reframe where I say it either goes in the trash or on my ass. Because either way, it's trash anyway, right? So we're able to reprogram the subconscious mind in a really cool way about this. One of my another student story is coming to mind. She was a student of mine a couple of years ago. Her blocker around throwing food away wasn't necessarily that she was told to eat everything on her plate, but her father didn't give her much love and attention, and he was gone a lot, but he was a chef. And so the way he showed his love for her was by cooking. And so because she didn't get much of his love on a regular basis, when she ate that food, it was like her ingesting her father's love. And so her throwing the food away is like, oh my God, I'm throwing away my daddy's love and I hardly get any of it anyway. And how could I do this? And so, that was her block. So it's always really interesting to uncover what happens, how it's slightly different for people. But yeah, that's another really, really common one. And it's a really easy fix. And see, people don't think about this stuff, right? They just think like, oh, I don't have willpower. I don't want to work out. I can't stick to a diet. And they end up beating themselves up about, having this problem when in fact, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on in your subconscious mind that you're not even aware of.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think too, that when we start to do work like this is when it comes to the surface that we can really start to figure out what that is. As you were speaking, I'm thinking, what was my situation as a kid? And, I'm one of 8 kids, so big family. One of, I think, which was such a smart thing. And I think it's because my mother came from a family of 12 kids. But she would, serve out food on the plate. So everyone, would she divvied all the food out, and that's what we got. It was always enough. There was never seconds. We were never competing for food. But it was always enough. And so, and we knew that if we didn't eat that, we didn't get anything. So it was like, okay, we've got to eat what's on the plate. Yeah. But my mum was a really good country cook. She was a great mother in that respect, where she would, she'd cook little pikelets or pancakes for us when we got home from school. We get them hot out of the fry pan. And the thing is, she'd do that because you just need flour, water, and eggs for that. Like, it was a cheap thing to do, but everything that she did in that respect, she did it to make it special. We used to go blackberry picking, and then she'd be making blackberry pies and, all those kind of things. But, I think just having that served out, and even when we had a block of chocolate on a Saturday night when we were watching a movie at home, she would hand out the chocolate. So there was no competing, and we always, everything was fair. Smart. So it was smart. Yeah.
That is something you hear from big fat. I actually want to talk about something you brought up. You brought up another weight loss blocker. That's the most common one that everybody has. And it'll be really cool to test it for you to see what yours is with this. But one of the things that I hear, just going back to the big family thing, you're right. Most families don't divvy out the food. So there's this competing, and I do find this with, men who have brothers, or big families where there's older brothers and siblings, there's older brothers and sisters, and everyone's kind of grabbing for the food. You've got to grab it. You've got to eat it while it's hot. You've got to get it before everybody else does. So, if people have that, which, most parents don't think to divvy it out, unless they grew up in a big family like yours did. But yeah, people who come from a big family or, have older brothers and sisters that would eat very quickly, they could have this anxiety around eating all the food on their plate because there might not be enough left for them. I love to give these examples because so many people, I love to give aha moments to people because, there's nothing more frustrating than not understanding why you're struggling with your weight, Okay. So the most common weight loss blocker is something called your feelings are in the food. And it actually comes from positive memories of eating food usually in childhood, but it can happen later in life. So the question that I always like to ask people is, what's the one food that if it's in the house, you can't stop thinking about it? Like, you have to eat it. So you'll keep yourself, if you're trying to be healthy, you won't buy this food because if it's in the house, you just keep going back to it over and over again. So do you have anything like that?
Not really. Although I have discovered, this cheese dip that Ralph's do, which I'm sure they have crack cocaine in. And, And I kind of know that if I'm going to crack that puppy open, most of it's going to be gone. I've actually been able to, and sometimes I go, no, I'm not going to buy it this time. And I'm like, well, who am I kidding? Of course I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
So that one thing, but what I do is that, because I think, I was married for 18 years and Glenn and I had very different food tastes. And even though I liked what he liked, because I liked most things, there were certain foods that I really liked that I didn't really get to eat with him. So I would, when he was traveling or something, I would go, and have a little picnic by myself with a glass of wine in front of the TV and eating all the foods that, he didn't like. But I found that carried on. Now that we're not together, I'm still doing that.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about that and let's figure out the cheese thing. So most people will say something like, I know for me, it was chocolate chip cookies. Like if there is a chocolate chip cookie in my house or a bag of them, that whole bag would have been gone in my past. So, for some people, it's chocolate or ice cream or potato chips, right? Sometimes it's soda. Sometimes it's Diet Coke, right? So, think about your food. And most people, by the way, have not just one of these. They have several. Sometimes I had like 50 of them. So, most people will have several of these foods. So think about the food that you can't keep in the house and then think about your earliest childhood memories of eating that food. So for you, Nat, because you don't live in the same country that you grew up in, although cheese is sort of cheese everywhere, oftentimes what I find is that people that are expats, they'll eat a certain food in the country that they're living in, but it'll remind them of a food that they used to eat in their home country. You mentioned something about how your mom had like warm hot cakes. So I was thinking maybe it would be something bready or carby for you. So usually if you think about, your earliest memories of eating this food, it'll usually be during a time that was really positive for you, or you'll have like really positive memories of eating that food. So for me, the cookies, the chocolate chip cookies came from me making cookies with my grandma. My grandma was like the one safe, very consistent relationship in my life. She loved me no matter how bad and naughty I was. She always loved me. And so whenever I'd go to her house, she would have these Chips Ahoy soft cookies in the cupboard, and I knew right where they were. She would hide them. She would try to hide them, but I'd always find them. And I would take a blanket and I would go grab the blanket and I would go to the couch and I would eat these cookies, and I just knew I was safe. And so, sometimes people will say, oh, every Sunday Dad would come and he would pick me up, and maybe, Dad wasn't around a whole lot, but they would go out and get ice cream. And that was their special day. Or, I would, every day from school, I would meet my friend and we would stop by this candy store on the way home, and, just sharing that memory and going back to a time that's really positive, especially as adults. The kids are freaking out. We've got, the stresses of being an adult. What's happening is subconsciously when we're going for those foods, we're craving that comfort that we used to feel when we were kids. So.
Oh, no, I know exactly what it is. It's,
you do?
Yeah, yeah. So, cause this dip is made from Jarlsberg cheese or Swiss cheese. Okay. And, my dad is German. So my grandparents are German. And so, and I loved things like black bread with liverwurst and Swiss cheese. And I used to eat that with my grandparents and my dad. And remember, my mum is my stepmom. And so this was my family. This was, this is that love connection that I had there. So yeah, I know exactly where it comes from.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that was like, okay, these are my roots. Like my birth mother's gone, but these people are my true family. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's always I spoke at an event to like 400 or 500 women a couple years ago. And I remember it was a weight loss event. And I remember taking the crowd through this exercise, and once people made that connection that they were eating these foods, not because they had shitty willpower, but because they're actually looking for love, 2/3 of the audience was just in tears. There's so much relief that comes up when women realize that it's not about you. It's coming from a much deeper place, and it's a part of you that's trying to feel safe and trying to feel happier and trying to actually take care of you and nurture you. But yet what we're doing is we're yelling at ourselves. We're telling ourselves we don't, we're not good enough. We have shitty willpower. We're never going to be able to stick to a diet. We're going to be fat our whole lives. So there's this whole negative dialogue when in fact there's a little part of you that's just trying to take care of you.
Yeah. And so I mean, having the realization, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to the podcast goes, wow, I can identify with certain things here. And wow, that's a revelation. I understand it. But now what? What do they do with it now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it took me about 20 years to answer that question. So, we have courses and, training material on all of this stuff. So it took me a really long time to come up with my own techniques around how to actually heal this. I use my own method that combines, tapping. It combines shamanic soul retrieval, NLP, all sorts of things that I've picked up along the way, all sorts of healing modalities to heal these younger parts of yourself. It was really interesting when you were talking about your ayahuasca experience. Going back and doing that soul retrieval is really, really important in this work, because what you have to do is when you have little pieces of you that haven't grown up yet, they will kind of create chaos in your life until you save them. And so that's one of the things that we do is we identify these younger versions of ourselves that haven't been healed yet. We give them what they needed at the time and then grow them up so that they're no longer, sitting in your subconscious, messing up your life. So, I have a lot of free stuff. I mean, people can go to YouTube. They can follow my YouTube channel. If you go to thinkandthin.com, we're happy to have a free conversation with you about, whether or not this is a good fit, and kind of analyze your weight loss blockers and see, if we think that we can actually help you with them. We're always really, really honest in the interview process and let you know whether or not we think it's a good fit. This work definitely isn't for everybody. This is for people that, you've probably been to a therapist before. You're comfortable talking about your past, although you don't love it, but you know that you're going to have to talk about your past and you're going to have to dig up some uncomfortable stuff. We're going to make you cry, but it's all cry, like a healing cry. It's not a bad cry. You'll feel a lot better after you cry. So people that are really ready to dig in and to do this work, those are the people that are ready for the healing methods that we have. And then there's lots of free stuff that I have online. You can also go to BrittanyWatkins.com, and there's a lot of blog posts that I have about this kind of work, and get on my email list. And I send out free techniques and free newsletters every week. So.
Yeah, I know. Well, the final part of my journey from Costa Rica was, the final night I was with the 3-year-old version of myself. And it was she was based on this black and white photo I have of me at that age. And she was really sad, and I've sort of grabbed her and I'm holding her and I'm kissing her and I'm like, it's okay, I've got you. I love you. And I go, look, this was a really important part of our journey. We had to go through this to become this person. So, we've got a big job ahead of us, and, I love you and I won't leave you. And at that moment when I said that, I realized, oh my goodness, you're my soul. I'm like, oh, so when you say love myself, you mean love this divine part of who I am? Because I'm in my head going, okay, I'm going to start in my gratitude journal writing down all the good things I did that day. And I'm like, no, not that kind of love. It's much deeper than that. And so, and then the next time when we did the breath work, I got to apologize for taking so long to get back to her. And so every morning I have a connection with her. When I'm making choices about should I go and buy a new bottle of wine, and she's sitting there shaking her head going, no. I'm like, okay, all right. So that's what we do now. But because we've now had that union, we have that connection.
That's beautiful. Working with your inner child is so, so powerful. And that's the majority of what we do, and just healing her, letting her be heard, letting her cry, letting her get angry, letting her, say the things that she couldn't say at the time, giving her grown up words and a voice to voice her opinion and to set boundaries. And, it's important. It's what we all need. And it's not, our parents don't teach us that. It's not something we learn in school. And unless you do that work, you'll kind of always struggle and not really feel that happy. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I love the fact that, what you've touched on here. And I think for a lot of us and I struggled with this for a long time, like you said, I knew what I should be doing, and I just go, Natalie, just keep the fork out of your mouth, will you? Just keep the wine in the fridge,
Yeah, I know. I'll never forget my boyfriend telling me one time, I finally realized, like, I was always hiding my emotional eating. And I think it was like maybe 25 at the time. And I remember telling my boyfriend that I like finally got the courage to tell him what was happening. He's like, I don't understand why you're gaining weight, because every time I'm around you, you eat really healthy. And then I finally told him that I do the secret eating. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He goes, well, just stop eating. Just stop doing that. And I looked at him and I just wanted to kill him, because obviously it's so obvious, right? Like, yeah, clearly we know that we shouldn't be overeating. The problem is that I couldn't stop doing it. So, you know, yeah, it's always very annoying.
Yes, I'm sure that there is plenty of women here that are really, you know, identifying with everything that we've talked about today. So thinkandthin.com or BrittanyWatkins.com are the best websites to go to get all those resources. And we'll make sure that we have some links on the page so that you can go directly through to Brittany's website. So, darling, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing it. You know, like I said, it's something that has hounded me for a long time. And even though I've had a better relationship with myself, it's like this last piece that just dropped in. I'm like, oh, wow. So now finally at the age of 50, I get to have a really great relationship with my body and with my self-image and with the love and my inner child and with my relationship with food. So
yeah. Congratulations. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, darling. Thank you so much for your
time. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. Now, if you enjoyed this episode and haven't yet subscribed to our podcast, please go ahead and do so on iTunes or Spotify, or go to mindmovies.com/podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now remember, new episodes are released every Monday morning. And this podcast is also brand new, and we'd love to spread the word. So after you've subscribed, be a great girlfriend and pass it on to a friend who will enjoy this too. Until next time, remember, it's not over, just different.